You know, looking back, it's kind of funny how we create these perfect little bubbles for ourselves. I really thought I had it all figured out. Jessica and I, we were solid. At least that's what I told myself. I didn't need to worry about the things other couples struggled with. We were different. I had this belief, you know, that bad things, the kind of stuff you hear happening to other people, it wouldn't happen to us. I believed in loyalty, in love that lasts forever. I mean, sure, I'd heard stories from friends, co-workers, even seen it happen, cheating, broken marriages, but Jessica wasn't like that. I knew her. At least, I thought I did. My friends would joke about how their relationships were tough, how they'd sometimes wonder if their wives were really faithful. I'd just laugh it off, confident in what Jessica and I had. I mean, she was my rock, my safe place. I used to tell myself, there are bad women out there, sure, but not Jessica. She's one of the good ones. That was the bubble I lived in. A belief so strong that it blinded me. My dream was simple. Happiness until the end. A house, kids, growing old together, the whole thing. I never even considered the alternative. Why would I? I trusted her completely. I never thought for a second that there could be cracks in the foundation of our life. But deep down, there were these moments, you know, those fleeting thoughts you push aside, that little nagging voice that says, what if? But I always shut it down. I'd think, not Jessica. She'd never do that. She's not like other people. She's loyal. I'm lucky. It's strange, really, how you can live in this perfect little world, so sure of everything, and yet in the back of your mind, there's this quiet fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of the one thing you're sure will never happen. And yet, here I am, talking about it, so I guess you know where this is headed. The truth is, we all live in these bubbles, don't we? Believing in the best, hoping for the perfect life, and convincing ourselves that we've got it all under control. But the thing about bubbles, they always pop, and when mine did, well, it wasn't just a little pinprick. It was a full-on explosion. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed in, it all came crashing down. It was one of those moments that comes out of nowhere. You're just going about your day, not a care in the world, and then, bam. Jessica looked at me, eyes cold, and said, I know you've been cheating on me. Just like that. No build-up, no hint of suspicion. She dropped it on me like a bomb. I remember freezing, like literally freezing. My brain couldn't even process the words at first. I must have blinked a few times, waiting for the punchline. I actually laughed. What are you talking about, Jess? But she wasn't joking. Her face was dead serious. I was floored. I mean, me, cheating? The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. My first instinct was to defend myself, to explain, but I didn't even know where to start, because there was nothing to explain. I hadn't done anything wrong. I tried to tell her that, but it didn't matter. She had made up her mind. Don't lie to me, she snapped. I know what you've been up to. She started listing things. Times I'd stayed late at work, a smile I gave to a waitress, messages she couldn't explain. And I was just standing there stunned, because none of it was true. I hadn't cheated. I was completely faithful to her. How could she even think that? And then it hit me. Why? Why was she saying this? Where was this coming from? I had nothing to hide, nothing to be guilty of, so why was she so convinced? I felt like I was suddenly in some twisted alternate reality. The woman I trusted more than anyone, the one I thought knew me better than anyone, was accusing me of the one thing I'd never do. It didn't make sense. I kept telling her, Jess, you've got this all wrong. I would never do that to you. But she wouldn't hear it. She was angry, hurt, and something else. She didn't just want answers. It felt like she wanted me to be guilty, like she needed this to be true. And that's when the doubt crept in. Not doubt about me, I knew I hadn't done anything, but doubt about her. Why was she pushing this? Why now? I couldn't wrap my head around it. Why would Jessica accuse me out of nowhere? She wasn't like this. At least, not the Jessica I thought I knew. But now, everything felt upside down. Was she projecting? Was there something else going on here? It didn't make sense, and the more I tried to make sense of it, the more I felt like something was seriously wrong. That's the thing about trust. You think it's unshakable until it isn't. And in that moment, as Jessica stood there accusing me of something I hadn't done, I felt the first cracks start to form. Cracks in the foundation of everything I thought we had. A few days after Jessica's accusation, I was still reeling. It didn't make sense. None of it did. We weren't perfect, but I never imagined this. I kept going over everything in my head, trying to figure out what had changed. Then, one afternoon, my neighbor Tom caught me while I was getting the mail. Tom and I weren't super close, but we'd always been friendly. Barbecues, small talk, that sort of thing. I didn't think much of it at first when he walked over. He had that look, though. You know the one? Like he was about to say something he wasn't sure he should say. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. "Hey, Mark," he started, scratching the back of his neck. "I don't want to get in the middle of anything, but there's something I think you should know." And just like that, my stomach dropped. There's nothing good that ever follows a sentence like that. I braced myself, but I had no idea what was coming next. "It's about Jessica," he said, his voice lower now, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. "I've seen her with someone. A few times, actually. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but I figured you should know." At first, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What do you mean with someone?" I asked, like maybe I hadn't understood him. But I had. I understood perfectly. He was talking about Jessica. My Jessica. He went on to say he'd seen her with some guy, he didn't know who, at odd hours, in places she shouldn't be if she wasn't hiding something. It wasn't just once either. It was enough times that he felt he had to say something. I remember just standing there, frozen. Number. My mind couldn't process what he was telling me. Jessica was seeing someone else? Number. No, that couldn't be right. Not her. Not the woman I'd built my life around, the woman who just days ago had accused me of cheating. I thanked Tom. At least I think I did. I don't even remember. It was like everything around me faded away. I was drowning in disbelief, my chest tight with the weight of it. I didn't want to believe it. But there it was, right in front of me, staring me in the face. The truth I didn't want to see. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? All those little moments started rushing back. Nights she came home late. The times she seemed distant. The times she accused me of cheating. It all started to make sense, and it made me sick. She wasn't just accusing me to hurt me. She was projecting. She was the one who had been unfaithful all along. It felt like my whole world had been turned upside down. Everything I thought I knew, every belief I had about our marriage, was unraveling. I stood there, numb, trying to make sense of the impossible. And that's when the anger hit. It wasn't just sadness or betrayal. It was anger. How dare she accuse me, twist things around like that, when she was the one lying to my face? I had defended her, trusted her, and all the while, she was the one breaking us apart. I couldn't go back inside. Not yet. I couldn't face her. Not until I had more answers. I needed to know who this guy was, how long it had been going on, why she had done this. But more than that, I needed to confront her. And this time, I wasn't going to let her turn it around on me. After Tom told me about Jessica, I thought I'd go straight to her, demand answers, make her explain herself, but I didn't. I couldn't. I wasn't ready for that. I needed time to process, to figure out if what I'd heard was even real. Because the thing is, even after hearing it from someone else, I still didn't want to believe it. I mean, how could I? How do you just flip a switch and accept that the person you've trusted for years has been lying to your face? It's not that simple. It's like your mind won't let you. There's this part of you that still clings to the idea that it's all a misunderstanding, that somehow it's not what it seems. I spent hours, maybe days, just thinking, replaying every interaction, every moment with Jessica over the past few months. I started remembering things, little things I hadn't paid attention to before, like how she'd started going out more, coming home later, saying she had work, or was meeting up with friends. At the time, I didn't question it. Why would I? I trusted her. But now, those moments felt different. They felt like missed signs, like warnings I had ignored because I was too busy believing in the bubble I'd built around us. My mind was at war with itself. One part of me was saying, "She wouldn't do that to you. There's an explanation. Tom must have gotten it wrong." But another part was screaming, "Open your eyes. You know it's true. You've seen the signs." I couldn't escape the doubt. It ate at me every minute of every day. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, thinking about her, wondering if she was lying next to me, thinking about someone else. I'd sit there watching her sleep and feel this sickening mix of anger and sadness, like I didn't even know who she was anymore. And yet, I still wasn't ready to confront her. I wasn't ready to hear the truth from her mouth. Because once I did, that would be it. There'd be no more pretending, no more clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't real. Once she said it out loud, I'd have to face the fact that my marriage was a lie. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one morning, drinking coffee, while she moved around the house like nothing was wrong. I watched her, the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, and I felt like a stranger in my own life. It was like I was outside of myself, looking in. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't. Everything was different now. The doubt and the anger were eating me alive, but I wasn't ready to let go of the life I thought we had. I wasn't ready to admit that it was all falling apart. And then there was that small part of me, the part that still loved her, that still wanted to believe she could be the person I had believed in for so long. That part of me was terrified that confronting her would mean the end of everything, that I'd have to walk away from the life we'd built together, and I wasn't sure I could do that. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. But deep down, I knew. I knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to accept it. Not yet. I couldn't put it off any longer. I knew it. After days of avoiding it, after sleepless nights and endless thoughts racing through my head, I had to confront her. I needed answers. I needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt. It was late, and Jessica was in the living room, scrolling through her phone like everything was normal, like our life was still the same. I stood there for a moment, watching her, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. My hands were shaking, my chest tight. This was it. "Jess," I said, my voice barely steady. She looked up at me, her expression calm, almost oblivious. "We need to talk." I could see the shift in her face immediately. She knew something was coming. She set her phone down, crossing her arms. "What is it, Mark?" she asked, her tone clipped, like she was already on the defensive. I didn't beat around the bush. I couldn't. "I know," I said. "I know about the affair." For a second, her face froze. I saw the flash of panic in her eyes before she tried to cover it up. "What are you talking about?" she said, forcing a laugh. "That's ridiculous." But I wasn't playing her games. "Tom told me," I said, stepping closer. "He's seen you with him, Jess. I know everything." Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to deny it again, but nothing came out. She just sat there, staring at me, her eyes wide like she'd been caught in a lie she couldn't escape from. "How long?" I asked, my voice cracking. "How long has this been going on?" For a moment, I thought she might try to deny it again, to spin some story that would twist the truth. But instead, she sighed, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. "A few months," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. A few months. All those nights she'd accused me of cheating, all the distance, the late nights out. It had been going on for months. My mind was racing, trying to grasp the reality of it, trying to make sense of how the woman I thought I knew could do this to me. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why, Jess? Was I not enough? Did I do something wrong? Tell me why." She looked at me, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just happened." "It just happened," I repeated, my voice rising. "An affair doesn't just happen, Jess. You made a choice. Every time you saw him, every time you lied to me, you made a choice." She started crying then, but I couldn't even feel sympathy. I was too angry, too hurt. I had given her everything. I had trusted her completely, and she had shattered that trust without a second thought. And now, here she was, crying like she was the victim, like she was the one who'd been wronged. "You accused me," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You stood there and accused me of cheating when all along it was you. How could you do that? How could you turn this on me when you were the one lying?" She didn't have an answer for that. She just sat there sobbing, while I stood there feeling like my entire world had come crashing down. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. And I didn't know what to do with that. I couldn't stay in that room any longer. I couldn't look at her. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I needed space. I needed air. But more than anything, I needed time to figure out what came next. Because after that conversation, I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same. I thought confronting her would give me some kind of closure, maybe even some relief. But it didn't. If anything, it made everything worse. As soon as I walked out of that room, it hit me like a freight train. All the anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it all came crashing down on me at once. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. It felt like I was drowning, like the air had been sucked out of my lungs, and no matter how hard I tried to catch my breath, it just wasn't enough. How could she do this? How could the woman I trusted more than anyone in the world turn around and destroy everything we had? And for what? For some guy I didn't even know existed until a few days ago? I looked at myself in the mirror that night, and I didn't even recognize the person staring back. Who was this guy? This broken, hollow shell of a man? I felt worthless, absolutely worthless. Every ounce of confidence, every bit of self-worth I had been ripped away, leaving me with nothing but emptiness. I started thinking, was it me? Was I not enough? Not good enough? Not attractive enough? Was I too boring? Too predictable? I went over every little thing I'd ever done in our marriage, picking apart every flaw, every mistake, like I was trying to find the answer in myself, trying to figure out where I went wrong. Because it had to be me, right? Why else would she cheat? That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart, it breaks you, it tears you apart from the inside, leaves you questioning everything you thought you knew about yourself. It makes you wonder if you'll ever be enough for anyone. And that's where I was. In that moment, I felt like I was nothing, less than nothing. I couldn't stop thinking about him. The guy. What did he have that I didn't? Was he better looking, smarter, funnier, richer? Did he make her feel something I never could? I couldn't shake the image of them together, laughing, smiling, being happy, while I was stuck in this nightmare. I kept picturing him, in my house with my wife, living a life I thought was mine. And that thought, it destroyed me. It tore me apart, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. I started questioning everything about myself. I started thinking that maybe this was what I deserved. Maybe I wasn't good enough for Jessica, and maybe I never had been. All those times I'd thought I was being a good husband. Maybe I was just fooling myself. Maybe I wasn't good enough to hold on to her. Maybe that's why she left. I felt so small, so insignificant, like my whole life had been a lie. Everything I thought I was, everything I thought I'd built, it meant nothing. Because if I was worth anything, if I had any value at all, she wouldn't have done this to me. She wouldn't have gone behind my back, lied to my face, and thrown everything we had away. I was spiraling, and I couldn't pull myself out of it. I couldn't stop the constant loop of self-doubt, self-blame, and bitterness. My mind wouldn't let me. It was like I was trapped in my own thoughts, my own insecurities, and there was no escape. I wasn't just angry at her anymore, I was angry at myself. Angry that I wasn't enough. Angry that I hadn't seen it coming. Angry that I'd let this happen. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was her with him. All I could hear were her lies, echoing in my head over and over again. I just sat there, in the dark, completely alone, feeling like I'd lost everything. And in a way, I had. I'd lost my marriage. I'd lost the woman I loved. But worst of all, I'd lost myself. I knew this moment was coming. Ever since the confrontation, ever since she admitted it, I knew I'd have to make a decision. But that didn't make it any easier. In fact, it felt impossible. How do you make a choice like this? How do you decide whether to stay with someone who ripped your heart out or to walk away from the life you've built together? I spent days, weeks going back and forth. One minute, I'd be dead set on leaving her. The next, I'd be thinking, maybe we can work this out. It was like there were two voices in my head, constantly battling it out, and I couldn't decide which one was right. Part of me was furious. I couldn't get over the betrayal. I couldn't get over the lies, the cheating, the way she looked me in the eyes and made me feel like I was the one doing something wrong. How could I ever trust her again? Every time I looked at her, all I could see was the affair. All I could think about was what she did, who she did it with, and why she thought she could get away with it. That voice in my head, the angry one, it kept telling me that staying would make me weak, that it would mean I was accepting what she did, letting her off the hook. But then there was the other voice, the one that remembered the good times, the one that remembered why I fell in love with her in the first place, the one that thought maybe, just maybe, people can change. Maybe she could change. Maybe we could fix this. I mean, it wasn't all bad, right? There were years of love, of building a life together. Was I just supposed to throw all of that away? Was I supposed to walk away from the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with? And then, of course, there was the future to think about. What would leaving mean for me? For her? I'd be starting over, and the thought of that terrified me. I wasn't sure if I could handle being alone, picking up the pieces of my life without her. I thought about everything we had, the house, the routines, the memories. Was I ready to give all of that up? Was I ready to walk out the door and never look back? And what if I stayed? What if we tried to work it out? Could I live with it? Could I live with the knowledge of what she did? Could I ever really forgive her? I didn't know. I honestly didn't know. Every time I thought I had made up my mind, something would pull me back in the other direction. I'd look at her, and for a moment, I'd see the woman I married, the woman I loved. And then, just as quickly, that image would shatter, and I'd see the lies, the betrayal, the broken promises. I felt trapped, like no matter what I chose, I'd lose something. If I left, I'd lose the life we built together. If I stayed, I'd lose my self-respect, my trust in her. Either way, I felt like I was going to lose. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think about anything else. Every decision I made, every thought I had, was consumed by this one choice. Do I stay or do I leave? I kept waiting for some kind of sign, something that would make the decision for me. But it never came. No matter how hard I looked, no matter how much I tried to reason it out, there was no easy answer. There was no right answer. All I knew was that something had to give. I couldn't live in limbo forever. I couldn't keep waking up every day wondering if today would be the day I made my decision. I had to choose, and whatever I chose, I had to live with it. When I couldn't handle it on my own anymore, I did what most people do when they're lost. I reached out to the people I trusted, my friends, my family. I thought maybe they could help me see things clearly, help me figure out what I couldn't. But it didn't go the way I expected. The first person I called was Dave, my brother. We'd always been close, and I figured if anyone could give me solid advice, it'd be him. We met up at this diner we used to hang out at when we were younger. I could barely get the words out. I remember sitting there, staring at my coffee, before finally blurting it out. Jess cheated on me. He just sat there for a minute, not saying anything. I could see the shock in his eyes. He didn't know what to say, and honestly, I didn't either. But once he got over the initial surprise, he started in on the practical stuff. "Man, you've got to protect yourself," he said. "You've got the house, the finances. You need to think about what happens next." And yeah, he was right. I knew that, but that wasn't what I needed to hear. I wasn't ready to think about the logistics, about lawyers, and splitting assets. I wasn't even sure I was leaving yet. I wanted someone to tell me what I should do, but all Dave could focus on was what came after. Then there was my mum. I called her a few days later. I figured she'd have some wisdom, something only a mother could say that would make everything click into place. But when I told her, all she said was, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. You two can work through this. You've been through tough times before." Work through it? I wanted to scream. How could we work through this? It wasn't like some rough patch we'd hit. This was betrayal. This was lying and cheating. How do you work through something like that? But she didn't see it that way. To her, it was just another hurdle, another thing marriage throws at you. She thought time would heal it, that forgiveness was possible. But she wasn't the one who had been cheated on. She didn't have to live with it. And then there were my friends. A couple of them said I should leave, no questions asked. "Once a cheater, always a cheater," one of them told me. "You deserve better, man." And yeah, part of me knew that was true. Part of me wanted to believe that walking away was the only option. But then there was the other part. The part that kept thinking about the life Jess and I had built, the years we'd spent together. It wasn't that simple. The more I talked to people, the more confused I became. Everyone had an opinion, everyone had their own take on what I should do, but none of them had to live with the consequences of that decision. None of them had to wake up every day and face the reality of either staying in a broken marriage or walking away from everything they'd known. And it wasn't just about me. I mean, Jess wasn't some stranger. She was my wife. She was the person I'd shared my life with for years. It wasn't easy to just throw all of that away, no matter what she'd done. But staying, that didn't seem easy either. And every time someone told me to do one thing or the other, it only added to the weight I was already carrying. I wanted someone to give me the answer, to tell me what was right, what was wrong. But nobody could do that. It was up to me. And the more advice I got, the more I realized that no one could make this decision for me. I was the one who had to live with it. I was the one who had to figure out what I could handle, what I could live with, and what I couldn't. So yeah, I talked to a lot of people, but in the end, it didn't bring me any closer to a decision. If anything, it just made it harder. Because at the end of the day, no one else was in my shoes. No one else could understand what it felt like to have your life ripped apart like this, and no one else could tell me what to do next. After everything, I realized something had to change. I couldn't keep living in that constant loop of doubt, anger, and pain. It was eating me alive. I knew I couldn't control what had happened, But I could control what came next. I could control what I did with the pieces of my life that were still left. It wasn't easy. Hell, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I started focusing on myself for the first time in what felt like forever. I realized I had spent so much time trying to figure out what I did wrong, trying to understand why Jess had done what she did, that I had forgotten to take care of me. So I took a step back. I started small. At first, it was just about getting up, getting through the day without feeling like I was drowning in it all. But then, I started doing more. I went for runs, hit the gym, tried to focus on clearing my mind, even if just for an hour. It wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about finding a version of me that wasn't consumed by the hurt. I remember the first time I really felt like I was breathing again. I was out for a run, and the air was crisp, the sun was setting, and for the first time in months, I felt this flicker of peace. It wasn't much, just a brief moment, but it was something. Something that reminded me that maybe, just maybe, I could get through this. Therapy helped too. I never thought I'd be the type to sit down and spill my problems to a stranger, but it turned out to be exactly what I needed. I needed to talk, to say everything out loud. All the anger, the guilt, the confusion. I needed to let it out. And when I did, it was like a weight had been lifted, like I wasn't carrying it all on my own anymore. My therapist helped me see that what happened wasn't about me. It wasn't my fault. Jess made her choices, and no matter how much I wanted to believe I could have done something to stop it, the truth was, I couldn't. I had to accept that. I had to let go of the idea that I could have somehow prevented it. It wasn't about me not being enough. It was about her decisions, her actions, and once I started to accept that, I started to feel stronger. I stopped looking at myself as a victim, stopped replaying the betrayal over and over in my head. I wasn't the guy whose wife cheated anymore. I was just me. I was Mark, and I had a life to live. There were still bad days, of course. Days when the memories would creep back in, when I'd hear something or see something that would remind me of her, and it would hit me like a punch to the gut. But those days started happening less and less, and when they did, I found ways to deal with them. I'd call a friend, go for a run, do something, anything, to remind myself that I was more than what had happened to me. And slowly, bit by bit, I started to rebuild. It wasn't about rushing into something new or pretending like the pain didn't exist. It was about learning to live with it, learning to carry it in a way that didn't weigh me down anymore. It took time, more time than I wanted to admit, but I started to heal. I started to find myself again, and I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was something good waiting for me on the other side of all this. I never thought I'd get to this point. For a long time, I didn't even want to think about meeting someone new. It felt impossible, like I was too broken to ever trust again. The idea of letting someone into my life after what had happened, I wasn't sure I had it in me. But then, out of nowhere, she came into my life. Her name was Emily. We met through mutual friends, and it wasn't anything serious at first, just casual conversations, harmless small talk. But there was something about her, something different. She wasn't pushy. She wasn't trying to get too close too fast. She just listened. I was hesitant, though. I mean, how could I not be? After what happened with Jessica, the idea of opening up to someone again, of trusting someone with my heart, terrified me. Every time Emily and I would hang out, I'd catch myself pulling back, putting up walls I didn't even realize were there. I kept waiting for something to go wrong, for her to betray me the way Jess had. It was like I couldn't shake the fear that history would repeat itself. But Emily was patient. She didn't push. She let me take my time. let me figure things out at my own pace, and little by little, I started to let my guard down. It wasn't easy, not by a long shot. Every step forward felt like a risk, like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I realized that if I wanted to heal, if I wanted to move forward, I had to give myself permission to trust again. It wasn't about forgetting what happened with Jess. That's always going to be a part of my story, part of who I am. But I couldn't let it define every relationship moving forward. I couldn't let what she did control the way I lived my life. I deserved better than that. With Emily, it was different. She didn't judge me for what I'd been through. She didn't try to fix me or push me to move faster than I was ready for. She just accepted me, scars and all. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could be myself again. The real me. Not the guy who had been hurt, not the guy who had been cheated on, but the guy who still had something to offer. It wasn't a smooth road. There were still moments when the fear would creep back in, when I'd wonder if I could really trust her, if I could really trust anyone. But I knew that I had to give it a chance. I couldn't live my life in fear, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next betrayal. I remember the first time I realized I was falling for her. We were just sitting together, talking about nothing in particular, and for the first time in a long time, I felt calm. No fear, no doubts, just this quiet sense of peace. It wasn't fireworks or some big dramatic moment. It was simple, and that's when I knew. Trust isn't something you rebuild overnight. It's slow, and it takes time. But with Emily, it wasn't about rushing or trying to force something that wasn't there. It was about letting it grow naturally, about giving myself space to heal, while also letting someone new into my life. And little by little, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could trust again. Not because I was ready to forget the past, but because I was ready to let go of the grip it had on me. Emily showed me that it's possible to love again, to trust again. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe, like I could move forward without looking back. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. If you had asked me a year ago if I'd ever find love again, I would have laughed in your face. I would have said love was a lie, that it wasn't worth the pain, that I'd never trust anyone enough to open my heart again. But here I am, living proof that sometimes, when you least expect it, life surprises you. Emily isn't what I expected. In fact, she's everything I didn't know I needed. It wasn't dramatic or some whirlwind romance. It wasn't the kind of thing you see in movies. It was steady, simple, and real. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I could just be myself. There was no pretending, no guarding my heart every second. With her, it was different. It was peaceful. I guess that's what love should feel like. Not chaos, not uncertainty, not constantly worrying if you're enough or if the other person is being truthful. With Emily, it just felt right. There were no games, no lies, just honesty. And after everything I'd been through, that honesty was more valuable than anything. It's funny how happiness sneaks up on you. For the longest time, I didn't think I'd ever get there. I didn't think I'd ever be able to move past what Jess did, let alone find someone new who could make me happy again. But day by day, without even realizing it, I started to feel lighter. The weight of the past didn't seem so heavy anymore. The betrayal, the heartbreak, all of it started to fade into the background. That doesn't mean it's forgotten. I'll never forget what happened with Jess. That part of my life will always be there, like a scar. But that scar doesn't hurt anymore. It's just a reminder of what I've been through, of how far I've come. With Emily, I don't have to worry about betrayal. I don't have to constantly question whether she's being honest with me, whether I'm going to get hurt again. She's proven time and time again that she's in this for the right reasons, that she values me for who I am. And that's something I never thought I'd find again. Happiness, real happiness, is different from what I thought it would be. When I was younger, I used to think happiness was this big, loud thing, something you had to chase, something that felt like fireworks. But now I know it's not like that. Happiness is quiet, It's sitting on the porch with Emily, drinking coffee and talking about our day. It's laughing about something silly, or just sitting in comfortable silence, knowing that everything's okay. And you know what? I deserve this. For the longest time, I didn't think I did. I thought Jess's betrayal was a reflection of me, of my worth, but it wasn't. That was her mistake, not mine. I deserve love, I deserve happiness, and I deserve to feel at peace. With Emily, I've found that. I've found someone who sees me, really sees me, and loves me for who I am. And for the first time in a long time, I can honestly say, I'm happy. I never thought I'd get here, but I did. And it feels like I'm finally home. It's funny how life can take you places you never thought you'd go. Looking back, it's hard to believe everything I've been through. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger. It all felt so overwhelming at the time. I thought it would break me, and for a while maybe it did. But standing here now, looking back on it all, I realized that I'm stronger because of it. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that you can't control what other people do. You can't control their actions, their mistakes, their choices. What happened with Jess? It wasn't about me. It wasn't about what I did or didn't do. It was about her decisions, her inability to be honest, her betrayal, and as hard as that was to accept, once I did, it freed me. I also learned that healing doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, it's messy. There are days when you feel like you're making progress, and then there are days when it feels like you're right back where you started. But that's okay. Healing isn't a straight line, and that's something I had to come to terms with. You can't rush it. You just have to take it one day at a time. But more than anything, I learned that I'm worth more than what happened to me. For a long time, I thought Jess's betrayal was a reflection of my own worth. I thought I wasn't enough, that I wasn't deserving of love or happiness, but I was wrong. What she did wasn't about me. It was about her, and I deserve better than to let someone else's mistakes define how I see myself. I deserve love. I deserve happiness. I deserve to feel at peace, and I'm finally at a place where I believe that. It took time. It took a lot of pain and a lot of self-reflection, but I'm here. I made it through to the other side. And if there's one thing I want anyone listening to this to take away, it's that no matter how broken you feel, no matter how impossible it seems, you can heal. You can find happiness again. It doesn't happen all at once, and it doesn't happen in the way you expect, but it's possible. And it's worth it. I used to think that betrayal would be the end of me, that I'd never recover, never be the same. And in a way, I'm not the same. But that's okay. I'm stronger now. I'm wiser. I know what I deserve, and I know how to protect myself from letting anyone take that away from me again. Life has a way of surprising you. It throws things at you that you never see coming. And sometimes, those things hurt like hell. But if I've learned anything, it's that you can get through it. You can rebuild. You can find love again. And most importantly, you can find yourself again.